All right, so you both are okay with being filmed?
Yeah.
I'm going back a little bit. Well, actually, I'll just try to watch my mouth out.
Is everyone ready? Your Honor.
One sec.
Is that still in your paradigm?
Is that? Don't tell me that is one. I just put pre-limit marks where someone labeled all their cards Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, Exhibit D. Like,
For real?
yeah. I boosted their speaks by 0.1.
I'm not blowing. Hold on.
She just wants to still.
I'm not blowing.
But with you, he's that familial bond.
Ready?
Okay. The existence of extrinsic goodness requires unconditional human worth. That means we must treat others as ends in themselves. Course Guard 83. When a rational being undertakes an action, usually supposes the object to be good. There must be something that is unconditionally good, so it can serve as a sufficient condition. Their goodness cannot be an obligation of inclination. If the inclination is defined and did not exist, their object would be without worth. The unconditionally valuable thing must be humanity. Regarding your existence, a rational being is an end itself, is a subjective principle of human action. This regard itself as capable of conferring value, and we must regard others also as ends in themselves. This outweighs all other terms collapse, non-contingent three-source obligations that inextrinsically good objects, but that presupposes the goodness of the rational will be necessity. My firm is inherent in the way we said ends. Ethics must be necessary, not contingencies. Otherwise, this claims to be escapable. Necessary truths outweigh on probability. If a necessary truth is possible, that means it's true in a possible world, but that implies it's true in all worlds, since that's what necessity is. So they have to prove their service. My framework. The standard is consistent with universal law. First, practical reason solves regress. It's impossible to deny reasons of authority development. Requirements that depend on external authority not to be escapable because the authority weak function demands of reason. Any source of authority depends on reason. However, to ask why should I ask for reason to demand a reason for reason considers the authority perforce reasons. Authority is self-justified. Only self-justification is epistemically sound. Otherwise, inquiry is infinitely regressive or circular. That means the name must prove their framework is based on a self-justifying axiom. Practical reason means we must be able to universally well maxims. Our judgments are authoritative and can't apply only to ourselves any more than 2 + 2 = 4 can be true only for me. The only constraint is on contradiction. Contradictions outweigh. If we accept one contradiction, we accept all statements. You can swear the first half of the disjunctive statement and render any second half true. Second, only the categorical imperative allows for an autonomous will. My framework is self-imposed by the structure of the will, so the will can be the cause of itself. Course Guard. If you can give a reason, you have derived some more fundamental maximum. They can ask you why you've adopted that one. If you not, your principle is randomly selected. If you need a principle about which is impossible to act by a free person would have chosen it. The categorical imperative has a status. The will must choose a principle for itself. Suppose that it chooses the categorical imperative. The formula merely tells us to choose the law. The free will retains a petition. Spontaneity. The free will need do nothing to make the universal the form of the universal law's principle. It already is. Its principle. Moral law does not impose a constraint on the will. Merely says that it has to do in order to be an autonomous will at all. And ethics requires an autonomous will because otherwise culpability is nonsensical. And third, all claims of free were provisional until brought under the public right. It's contradiction to will or world. One's will can be denied. This necessitates an omnilateral will con. When I declare a thing matter, thereby making it obligatory anyone else to refrain from using the object, the obligation involved here comes to a simple study map. I'm to leave another property which if everyone else has non-term guarantee with regard to what's mine that they will act in accordance with exactly the same principle. Unilateral will cannot serve as a coercive law for everyone. Only will binding everyone else can will that provide the guarantee required. Fourth, we said it's based on practical identities like student or debater. However, human identity or rationality is a source of practical identity. Since it's necessary to determine what roles to take on, that means we can't ever really understand human identity for the sake of practical identity. Only vice versa. Advocacy. I defend the resolution as general principle. Specific type of limiting is irrelevant to this question. The general maxim behind QI. You can link this as to any type of QI limitation. Contention was toward law. QI self toward litigation 1006. Law prevents damages to people whose rights have been violated. Constitutional sources serve critical competentiality and different function. The Supreme Court has established substantial barriers to such use against public officials whose decisions to develop absolute immunity toward actions. Officials promoting prosecutorial judicial or legislative function when they commit the act for which they are successfully claim immunity. That's a violation of universal law. Both positive and negative duties obligate us to always pay damages. Rips 4. If I injure you or damage your goods, I prevent you from using your powers to set and pursue your own contempt of the goods. Division of responsibility sheds considerable light on the doctrinal threshold of tort law. If I wrongfully injure you, I am liable to you in damages just because the payment of damages aims to make you whole. That is to restore you as much as possible, to pick you back in the same place with respect to your ability to set and pursue your own possession of the goods. Intentionality is irrelevant. Property rights are contingent. If I accidentally steal your thing, you still have a right to that thing, so I'm obligated to give it back. Intention to is a constitution. Continuism means we have to follow the constitution. 8 point, violating procedural constraints violates the categorical imperative. If it were universalized, there can be no constraints. Rate B, the state exists to maintain equal freedom, but the constitution is necessary to temporarily temporally unify the state's identity. Otherwise, the state cannot be considered to be unified entity over time as policies and policymakers change. QI violates it, allows people to get away with unconstitutional actions based on contingent circumstances, but the Constitution's authority is categorical, and QI means we can never clearly define constitutional rights, which causes infinite violations over time. Bierman 9, under current law, immunity is overcome only the defendant clearly violates established right. Repeated immunity definements can cause the law to stagnate with regard to constitutional offenses that are likely to be litigated only in the tort context. Officials might repeatedly engage in the same context and necessarily defend with qualified immunity, leaving the scope of constitutional rights undetermined. Contention 3 is police lawsuits, solved rights violations, jails are 1. No police officer wants to be sued, particularly where there's no absolute guarantee that their employer will pay. The real municipal legal costs associated with the funding of liability and exposing the municipal employer common sense supports the view. It would be foolhardy to assume the knowledge that a subject might sue has no inhibitory effect on review. Static identity exists. Even reductionism presupposes a transcendental unity of self-consciousness. Con. I think must accompany representations or otherwise something would be represented which should not be thought. I think must be capable of accompanying all representations is in all acts of consciousness on one and the same and accompanied by it. No representation exists for me. The unity of apperception, I call this transcendental unity of self-consciousness. Manifold representation would not all of them be my own representation, that they not all belong to one self-consciousness. Prefer a practical to ontological understanding of identity. A practical static identity is inescapable. Course guard. Whenever some group wants to act as a unit, must form a sort of person, say a corporation. We have a state only where citizens have constituted themselves in a single agent. We do not need to posit the state as separately existing entity. Pragmatic necessity be overwhelming. When a group of human beings occupy the same territory, we have an imperative to form a unified state. When a group of psychological functions occupy the same human body, they have even more imperative need to become a unified person. This is why the human body is the same basic kind of agent. And second underview. One, if I win a counter-interpretation this year, theory about time press rebuttal means the evidence ability to collapse the theory in order to overcome the inequity of 3 times. Otherwise, the 2 and are also move the large questions of water by taking theory. Prefer times to other links of fairness because it's quantifiable and verifiable. 2, negative sideways attributes. A, some attributes that should overcome the sideways and times 2. B, attributes in the dark hole, the negative reaction, which means we're discussing whether their arguments are abusive. They can compare directly with the circumstances around. I have to do so hypothetically. 3rd, presume I said 4, 6, 3 times 2 means A, if 4 times I've done the better debating, and B, it's fair to give the ath the advantage of being able to win by eliminating all offense and neg.
And hold on, I'll flash after.
Engaging the state is good. Cover Stone 5. Democracy means citizens bear the obligation to debate what the government should do. Absent discussion, motivation, political options, business laws. Narratives unconnected power, co-opted by power. Role-playing power with learning the levers of power. Simulations more power than abandoning personal power. Role-playing teaches students the language of power that paves the way for political actions and strategies for change. Must contract governmental power, but in a limited voice. I have full-scale governmental actions. Also,
Yeah, that's fine. Good out. Yeah.
CX.
Yep.
Your course go actually at the top of the framework. You say how reason authority is self-justified and it's epistemic. Actually, first question: are there any arguments that affirm absent a standard?
No.
Okay. Back to this. You say reason is self-justified. What is the warrant and the implication of this claim?
Yeah, so reason is self-justified because to ask why should we care about reason is to itself ask a reason for reason, which concedes reason's authority. So it's impossible to question the baseline assumption that having reasons for things is the authority for determining what to do, and that means that we terminates the chains of infinite regress. So reason in this context is not your intellectuality or your ability to make quote unquote good decisions, but it's rather literally the fact that we do things not just aimlessly as mindless robots, but instead do things as agents who.
What is the categorical imperative?
The categorical imperative. Well, there are 3 different formulations. The first is the formula of universal law, which is that in order for an action to be good, we must be able to.
Your argument, you say the categorical imperative laws for an autonomous will. What's the warrant for an autonomous will is valuable in itself?
Well, ethics would be impossible without an autonomous will because then.
Wait, is that argument in the app?
Yes, it is. It's the analytic undercourse.
Okay. So what is the argument?
It's that without an autonomous will, we cannot hold the individuals accountable for morally bad actions, so there can be no normativity.
Oh, this is the culpability argument?
Yeah.
Culpability is wait. There's no warrant rather than that. It just says ethics requires an autonomous will because otherwise culpability is nonsense.
Well, you can explain how culpability is compatible with a non-autonomous will.
Okay, that's fine. You say, what is the omnilateral will? Is it just a will of the state?
Well, yeah, I mean, the argument is that contractually individuals, in the state of nature, would come together in order, because otherwise there would be no a priori grounds for.
That's fine. You say negative abuse outweighs app abuse, so let's say I read something very marginally abusive and you read 100 nibs in the 1 yard. Is that abuse still
so
going to outweigh?
Obviously, it's not the only possible weighing standard. You can still compare it with other weighing standards like magnitude.
That's fine. You say some abuse is necessary to overcome the side bias. Where do you warrant a side bias in the app?
The Ari Azbel is specifically in the context of time press rebuttals, which is a
So just
Yeah,
that one. Okay, you say the next speaks in the dark. I'll take the last 30 seconds.
Is that okay with people?
Okay, you guys?
I mean, if it's okay with you, like if it's not okay with you, then
I
like
can just aimlessly ask
wait,
questions.
is that fine? No, like is that fine with you, Ali? Is the question? Yeah.
You can aimlessly ask.
Actually, please make the con argument done review.
So the con argument says that Kant says that it's impossible to anytime we say that and from the perspective of the acting agent, there is always a kind of unity of self-consciousness, which means that we can't really say like.
Sorry, So order is 2 off the case, starting on the underview and the contention.
Which underview?
The first one. Or underviews in order.
Okay.
Is everybody good? They're focused on an ideal pyramid of subject functions under a starting point. Performance ready to recognize the way our sentiments and becoming controls of their model leads us to the point of stasis that we begin to subjugate ourselves rather than identity should be understood through a fluid relationship to the machine. John. Literal philosophy begins with the self-identity. The subject always powers of the world because it gives the form of the content empty from matter because being easy to vocal, the world cannot be articulated in terms of the relation self-contained identity. All being is infinite. There's no self-contained identity outside the world of determination universal. There's no universal subject is the very universal human rights only variable and never by pajama supposition and subjectification, rationality involves a deterioration in between the thoughts of the world while philosophers regard rationality as the foundation of normativity. We do not disprove action because it's vicious and it's vicious because it is really no, we will not have to be glad with our sentiments and ourselves to be governed by the delusion placed individuals with the machine and individuality and the various relationships of all among individuals who are understood and machining process unlike organisms, which is done by the whole identity unlike the setting subject of theory, machines are fluid connecting the reconditioned of the machines, the world that connects and governs bodies, the lack of ability to realize its own interests independently. Machines produce connection and predictable ways. They recreate the balance, try to find attempting to eliminate deviance to do with politics, inclusion, nature, target individuals represent deviancy. Heaven 10. When the real place predicate on the elimination of difference more words to get dedicated to achieve the will of the project really becomes lethal as an unintended poverty with that is like liberals and get mastery of proposed unification of species. Becomes dangerous to murder version liberal imagination to balance against teaching against the new exposed enemies of humanity. The alternative is to dismantle the basis undermines the faciality which needs to be recognition through their normative value. Big 12. Dismantling the basis of politics involving bullying, becoming patriotic, dismantling the basis of politics, deterioration and transformation, faces involve resonance that's like reality, the heart of the faces formation, but practical reason misconstrues the basis of the structures of productive and desire to sandwich imposition given under the meaning of produces that predetermined interpretation experience, subject and the signifiers are not constituting the also the effective process which meaning is constructed to associate history of the different coherent visualization causes to face the here begins to appear a features of the inscribed emergence fixed right upon mobile surfaces spiritual landscape within the future of their over periods, dismantling the face of laws becoming which points are becoming unstable, searching for the collection of individual discourses, meanings contradict the abstract machine patriotic shapes concrete visual sometimes becomes transparent. The overall values of the role of the better for that are the best for interrogating the oppressive politics of recognition. McCormick. Ethics means acknowledgement of different embodiments of difference, but also the system of geometry, cultures, understanding the body, acknowledgement of the body, culture, recognition, even differences in our knowledge, but also the source that for culture, recognition, difference, assimilation, even recognition, social culture, we can see the other reasons to achieve, he or she is male invisible to the dominant system, no remarkable subject, because only exists only embarrassment, majority variance, minority, marginalized to the failure, the ethnicity based on individual, their guidelines, zones, probability, the limit, and to the nationalized, they have naturalized the connection, the urge to tell you that the basis is not redundant to the cluster, majority, we recognize what realize the known potential. Next topic is theory. Interpretation of the affirmative must explicitly specify to what extent the limit qualified meaning delineate adverse sex in the one other than application of limitation, i.e. whether the defendant will limit its beginning meaning specific instances or wholesale by violation holds that adverse sex. He does not do this. Now, negative first, there are multiple ways to limit qualified meaning. The doctrine itself functions in specific dimensions. Channel 9. Qualified immunity provides broad spectrum. The court is by qualified and separate distinctions. Policy granted by the Constitution. Court is under the policies might be on for the federal options. The Constitution litigation policy have the court might be restricted to lower court decision making or courts have policies of factual complexity associated with litigation. Proliferation qualified immunity multiple inductions. In fact, case support the close resolve already. If the advocates had on one method, it would be good then nagging on another method. There's no way to low way. Expecting solves into the enemy starting point key to fairness to be determined winner. Also, this is the they need to win the evidence in order to control the legitimacy. The interpretation topic is a support is entering the centers is sufficient to win back evidence. Contribute top down the top of ground. Be support is to be opinion random interpretation of lacks. So back in the second is ground. Support and death can't be like, oh, I die. What if you don't know the limitation? I advocate. Yeah, because it depends on what kind of principle according to what wish someone will be or not be held accountable by the clear established or versus the clear constitution, which holds different standards. It also means the X is not checked because the advocacy incoherent things with you. It also means that it obviously matters under the content. If you be support and they sub the next really consequential terms that they can make it a coherent argument about policies and intention of policy are always concerned. Need to as an option. Otherwise, advocacy always been guaranteed fairness and education since the basis of which we've argued to topical discussion. Now, under your model debate topic of theory comes to form and theory 103 is supported the affirms being under your by introducing the advocacy that firms down like church are driven by that be supported the interpretation that could offer the improvement of the counter-interpretation as follows. Their interpretation is okay if they're topical. If they're not topical, implicitly they're damaged. Their counter-interpretation. B says he's the point is that topical. B said the advocacy legitimate reason why they need to interpret what the advocacy about any particular grounds the topic should also needs to be in response to the advocacy. It would be English topic and also be predicted by negative one both the advocacy have the equal grounds to find this always these conditions don't need to leeway in our response. I not contend that topic carries reasonable rather theory has two implications. One, usual reason to interpretation. B supported two. You come to T comes forward. Theory comes forward. One earth theory, meta theory to clarify all any theoretical objections that in that makes you ignore, which also introspect your advocates that ways that your arguments on the case. Certainly under your arguments. First, on the contrary, you say static identity. To say support is obviously linked to the critique. The critique says, well, the critique that this book is static identity is bad. Support doesn't take out the critique. The critique says, either at the core of us there might be conception of static identity, but that view is incomplete. The critique concludes that we have to focus on identity that unfolds naturally past this conception. What is reason? See support is not take out that also circumvention is false. So we have static identity on the core of the agent. For example, we have different things like our affects, effects that are constantly unfolding that ascribe past the static identity. So you not have this another course whatever. You say how this you see another you say how practical reason is refers to ontological understanding of identity. Support is a prediction on ontological question rather than a view of the orientation towards the subject. Different towards the being in the first place. So it still has a view of what the reason is in the first place. So just as just some things in the first place. Also, even if you want identity is inescapable, it's not relevant to that view. That conception of identity is not unique. Now you say how do you go with the counter on theory when the rate a support is you're not with your RBI. I'm not reading reasonable. As soon as you do now, you're saying that you always have to use someone to the reason why top county or top theory. I always also two aircrafts is damning this question. You contextualize any arguments which in fact turns all of your times to your arguments gives you the last station and then for the debate, even if that infinite probably the word to class this question. Also 13 also we both have 13 minutes, which increases time to now. The course of evidence, when individual activism is more effective reform than the state, we must be survived by reform against state. Second, policies aren't always compared against other policies. They're presented against outside persons. That's how that means we should still got policy education with policy speech compared against rest movements of the Also, this is a new link. Policy focus on link. You should not use it because the legit but the same categories and the prioritization of those categories. Use them government mechanisms as a paradigm for pragmatic mechanism, not a framework. Free to the framework. They cannot crossify by agencies. Important reasons take out the critique is also about understanding agency. The critique, the critiques where you build agency. It is not static by being itself. So it is economic process and it's not complete change. Second, the standard attempts to ground agency. And then the second conception, the reason or define definitive view the subject. The single here. We cannot be confined to the definition of subject. We are constantly changing, unfolding different affects, effects, and our symmetry. But that's not a single guard assembly. It says how much traffic the effects subjects are differentiated outcomes, design machines, outcomes, that kind of entails insufficiency and subjectivity in terms of stable identity, rationality, subject or ideal, authentic, the unconscious, productive, and constructive means subjects like changing, transcendent, procedures with fixed identity, impacts the outcome there. Impacts the support is a meaning means what it is to critique for your conception of agent is not one no restriction. Even if you win all your framework arguments, even if you win all your framework arguments, for example, why also it's like the reason why the NC is not collapsed. The critique is not collapsed. The NC framework because obviously the NC is not based on the extrinsic good, rather it's a view intrinsic view. Something also takes out a reason why reason is important. Reason is always changing, just like our desire. It's not grounded in some agent, because that assumes that agents have to be universal, which responds to your response to your development argument. Say, well, also you see how factual reason is self-justified. It's not even if it's self-justified, it's always changing. In the first place, it's not relevant. Also, no actual person can actually uphold the conceptual structure of the agent, which we present. They assume that people instantiate the structure of agency, the link from the structure of the agent, and motivation. People does not account for the factual reason, rather we only to get motivate individuals to follow through not following affects, the effects, meaning things that can the question, which enters back here, which also enters back to the fourth argument, the same how human identity is only source rationality. This proves that this conception of human identity is not complete. I read it.
Okay. Ready?
No, I didn't mean to turn.
That's right. Okay.
I'm not ready. Alright, I'm good.
What was the very last argument?
The argument as an application I drew from the C subpoint that no individual can hold up this conceptual structure of an agent, which takes out your number 4 point on the framework because it says human identity is only source of rationality. My argument is no one can uphold this conception of human identity of the act.
Okay. A lot of your evidence refers to desire being in flux and constantly changing. What's the interlink between that and our identity being
Okay, so to make clear something up, the argument is not purely desire, rather desire is a combination for affects and effects. The argument is our affects is our like non-cognitive relationships to the world around us, and our effects is how we relate to other individuals. And the argument is identity. Your focus on identity, or identity in itself, is only bound in these conceptions of it.
How is that true? Like, what piece of evidence indicates that like we only have a conception of identity?
Right. So even if you win, like you're gonna win. Even if you win an argument, like for example, reason or like the constitutivism is true or something. It says there are other things like desires or affects, effects that expand past that conception of agent, which prove how that is not the source of agent.
Well, wait. So no, my question is why is the like foundation or formulation of agency through our affects and our desires?
Because the argument is that the only way we can relate to other individuals is through things like our effects, or we can relate to the world
around us. So the way we relate to other people is
and the world around us, or like even conceptual rules in the first place. Sorry.
The way we relate to other people is in flux, but what does that mean? That
no, not just to other people, but the world around us, just and like conceptual rules. For example, those relationships, anything
so,
like that interacts is constantly changing.
So universal rules are also bad.
What?
So universal rules are also bad.
No, our relationships and rules are always changing.
Why doesn't that mean our relationship to the role of the ballot is constantly changing?
Because the role of the ballot is not like a rule. What should do? The role of the ballot is saying
it's not a rule. It doesn't have to listen to the role of the ballot.
No, I mean you should listen to the role of the ballot. But it's not like this is like a universal maxim. The argument is that the critique is an instantiation of the role of the ballot. Also, I think you're like conflating.
Why isn't the app just the instantiation of the standard? In the same exact sense.
What do you mean?
You don't make a link argument that's like the universality.
Not in the one I see now. I don't make a universal link now.
Okay. Let's talk about
the CX question.
Topicality. So there's definitely no way you can win on this if I don't read theory, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Upperstone. You say that individual activism is more effective. Why is that like exclusive with also considering?
So the argument is that a focus on the state uniquely is bad, i.e., purely having state-centered education is the incorrect starting point. We can still focus on other things like the critique, which is functions on the individual activism and individual reforms within the view of the subject that can square against that.
Okay. You say that. Okay. What's the reason why an actual person would never uphold the conceptual structure of an agent?
The argument is that you assume, like, innate structure of what an agent can uphold. What the critique says, the good structure, it critiques your motivation for an agent, i.e., you say an individual is I shall continue.
Wait, actually, I have a different question. You said something about the intrinsic versus extrinsic.
Yeah, that argument does not take out the critique because it's not focused on an extrinsic good being bad or good or bad in the first place. That's the warrant in this like ASA point is like, oh, all extrinsic goods collapse to intrinsic goods, but it doesn't focus on that.
Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Come on. No, no. You can do it. Come on. Come on, you can do it.
Order is overview on case that you will probably want to fill on a separate sheet of paper, and then the K. Ready?
I'm sorry, can you say the order again?
Case with an overview that you should follow on a different sheet, and then the case itself, and then the K.
Okay. Are you starting on the overview though? Because you're like
Yeah.
case and then overview.
Yeah, no, starting on the
Okay.
Ready?
Nate put himself into a bad position because I only need to win one argument to win the debate, which that static identity exists. You've conceded a lot of framework warrants. First, you've conceded course guard that that unconditionally valuing the rational will is a subjective principle of human action, because anytime we value anytime we set an end, we presuppose our ability as rational agents to value the end in the first place with the purpose. That was completely conceded, which means that it is literally inescapable. We cannot conceive of ourselves as taking action without having a rational will. Second, if valuing reason is inescapable, that is the reason why we do have rational will, which takes out all of its arguments. You've considered the second piece of course course guard evidence, which that the categorical imperative allows the will to be the cause of the self. This outweighs all of his arguments because they indicate that the desire or the affect or the effect is constantly in flux, but that presupposes that the actual motivation for our will. My argument is that if we abide by the categorical imperative, then the will is the cause of itself, so it actually is autonomous. Last, you can see the fourth one under the standard, which is practical identity. It's impossible to conceive of ourselves without understanding ourselves as being inside a certain practical identity as a student or debater, because that is how we set ends to begin with and decide what things to value. Now, the case.
Proper.
First, your line by line arguments. You say that you can't cross-apply because the agent is always in flux. Respect the question of the arguments about you are wrong. Now, you read another code. You need to read another code. There's some SP evidence about desire. There's no interrelation between desire constantly being in flux and our agency. Obviously, we have different motivations that are constantly changing, but that doesn't change our ontological nature per se. Now, you say that the intrinsic versus extrinsic doesn't take it out. But yes, it does. It's not a question of you evaluate it because you have missed the argument that it's the subjection principle of human action. Now, the rationality argument development indicates that reason is self-justified because to ask why reason is to itself presupposes the authority of reason. You say that reason changes, but no, the content of our reason to change, but not our status as rational entities who are not robots who act for no purpose at all. We are always rational agents who act for a particular purpose in mind, which means that your argument just falls. Also takes out your argument for why no one can uphold the structure. Now the underview. Extend Kant even reductions and presuppose the nation of a static identity because they say that we are encapsulated by multiple kinds of self-consciousness. Presuppose that I am presupposes a kind of singular agent that encapsulates all of those different things. You say that's a link to the K, but that's fine. I will win the K debate. You say that it doesn't take it out because the subject is incomplete, but this just begs the question: the subject is complete because any attempt to say that the subject is part of multiple parts just to say that there was an I in the first place, that it's constitutively divided by multiple sections, which presupposes the truth of the static identity. You say that it's false because affects constantly change, but it doesn't respond to the internal warrant. Also, I already answered that argument about not going for the courts guard argument. Now, Coverstone, you say the individual action is keeping. Coverstone says that it's necessary for us to become informed citizens who can to make demands on the state. It's not a question of role playing, but it's criticizing the state policies, which means that we'll be able to become effective democratic participants. You say that you can compare with that also takes his reason why it's a new link because it's ultimately a question of our own political agency. Now, the K. First theory is a link because it attempts to create a universal nature of the individual, which always because it's a form of contradiction, which is like premeditated murder. Theory is uniquely bad because it tries to set universal norms for debate based on an idealized notion of a debater subject. Now, second, you should use ethical modesty. You consider the offense, which I'll extend here. You consider that it violates a perfect duty to not have lawsuits always be repaid, which links to the framework. If there's any mitigation on the K, then you should default to voting out when there's any risk that there's a status subject. Third, you should use truth testing because that's what the tournament specifies jurisdiction always because it's your considered obligation. It's also key to fairness because otherwise you move 6 minutes to yes, so I can't get it in the case, which means it wasn't fairly tested. Now the line bill in the case specifically. 1, June makes a bunch of assumptions that are totally unjustified. A, that rationality is false. B, that rationality is not normative. C, that relativism is true. D, that being is all immanent. And that E, that identity is blue. June just summarizes Duluth but doesn't warn his view. Second, no impact at all. Nothing happens in this debate round or after we leave debate as a result of my defensive con. Third, you link your role about treats the judge as having a certain static identity and asserts ethical claims about what the judge should do. Fourth, ratio. Without identity, we can't have affirmative action programs that acknowledge the oppression of certain groups of people, which destroys the efficacy of politics. Fifth, I am not a politics of conclusion because I don't attempt to establish to integrate in people in the context of your evidence. I just say that that people share some facets. Also, perm do both. No reason why it's mutually exclusive.
overview, the critique, then the case.
When you say overview, do you mean his overview, or you mean a new overview?
Just like order like on the K. Like it matter.
Okay, case.
Yeah. Okay. Is everybody good? Some key questions you have to decide before you determine before you decide your ballot. First, you best uncover the on-case state link, which is another reason why I link back to my role. But second, verifications you best uncovered on the role of ballot, which is the McCormick evidence, which means you have to test whether we use it to interrogate the oppressive politics of recognition. You have to test whether the affirmative offense and justice in the first place. The massive problem with the one error is winning static identity exists. It's not a take out the critique, those are just the arguments made on the case, which is framework interactions. The thesis of the critique relies on you having an assumption of a static identity in the first place. Even if static identity exists, the thesis of the critique is that having that assumption is the incorrect starting point. This identifies the inclusion, which the impacts the evidence arguments. That was also conceded, and you have conceded role value on the alternative. You have conceded the alternative, and why it's all like also all I have to do is respond to your very copy of the arguments made in the critique proper. They don't have to win any of the case arguments. For example, Semensky, in order to win the critique, even if agency's contention of my argument is a critique of that conception of framework. So you don't even when the framework is proves why that conception is bad. Now the K proper. Extend the John evidence. Extend the John. Sorry. Okay. Extend on the apples on a specific normative subject to define subject within no strings only. The app starts with the subject, which is defined completely through reason. For example, what constitutive nature of the agent that is defined the rational being. It is not specified categorizing the world surrounding principles to do things and creating a transcending order. However, being is not contained. It is fluid and interacting with the world. The thesis of the critique we should rather view. We should not view the subject contains some sort of rational identity. What is the reason to find the argument is that we have an incomplete view of the subject. Although response to the incomplete views of the subject are not relevant to the subject for the general words. Why? You consider the reason why specifically why the critique that cares about why things like affects, defects, and different things that are stemming from our national desire that are non-cognitive that escape past this convention of view of the subject are relevant under the critique. Otherwise, we link into the impact, which is the evidence argument. That was conceded another line. Like you say how your first two arguments are terrible. You say no out about impact. They don't need out of impact. And I guess you have to have a link back to the role of also your first argument is assuming they can trust something. No, the critique obviously I say I have a bunch of assumptions. The critique doesn't have a bunch of assumptions. That your assumption is bad in the first place, which is implicated in conjunction with the evidence argument. Also, you say the judge's identity setting. No, it's not. It's a completion of pre-impulse distinction. This is a critique of your memory methodology and approach to be disappointed. I don't know. I assume the judge's identity setting for it can be known, but I don't know whether these three judges. We don't know whether these three judges are assigned through. You're not sure that these three judges the Kantian subject of the first place. So, for example, you view the lens of the critique. Also, you make a race. The A subpoint is no implication under the critique. By one is strict. Like on the critique, you should weigh that against the argument. B subpoint is the critique is done much better for reasons because your racism operation under the idea we can be included under this model. The critique says this model of inclusion, which racism permits. Which racism permits is not wrong with always could be compared to this ideal view of what the subject is, which is what LDC refers. Also, you say theory is a link. It's like premeditated already. Subpoint is not only but not really impacts whatever reason why two reasons rejecting is just a preemptive argument. So it's not a reason to wait. Now, subpoint is not only by if it's not subpoint theory is not only if it's just offense under your model of debate. I.e., it's not a reason to put me down under my interpretation. It's also used to weigh the performative contradiction against link theory. Now, also the evidence was conceded to the impact of the critique is the subjective understanding of a subject to a specific one subject over the others. You see conception of the subject that is bounded with these categorical features of what is reason is in the first place. You can now you say distribution as ethically modest evaluation of critique. A support is you know more specifically ethical modesty in the first place. B support is if I you should not lead to judgment intervention or more specifically ethically modest in the first place. Now the alternative. It's in the big note 12 evidence saying we should make ourselves illegible to conception and dismantle the face. The alternative solves this because we do not be categorized by some alternative view of what the subject is in the first place. Also, what the subject is in the first place. For example, was also judged on evidence specifically because there's no categorization of fixed identity of the individual. Now you say truth testing always is jurisdiction. It's important to cross by the McCormick evidence. McCormick evidence. It is within your jurisdiction. There's no second argument is you're not warned why specifically this is the judge's jurisdiction. You just say assume tournament division, but in order to tournament invitation, but no in that way it's the second support is the critique reading textualize what truth is in the first place. Truth is not synthetic conception of what else. It's not synthetic definition, rather it is constantly unfolding. Also, you see permutation, no permutation. The links prove your conception of agency should reject it. We cannot coincide to conception of agency. Now, the case. First, as group the overview, on the cover some argument. Even if you win all of your arguments on the case for why static identity exists, I will still win an easy link to the cover some argument, specifically which is independent reason to get other critique. So tonight, I'm going to link on the CSO with the response to cover zone. How the focus on the state is problematic is identity's definition of making an individual eligible. For example, the state how a census immediately to share whether black, white, male, or female, which is the definition of categorizing and determining whether we are what identity category and we should be characteristics that which outweighs should be characteristics. You say talks about the potential of the state. No, there is not a question of potential state, but why they focus on the state being good, which is like the critique. So also you say cover so your first response is not applied to some focus because the third argument proves why this application of a state is better than the first place. So the impact is your reason why it's now the extensions of like the responses to the case. The biggest running issue on the AC is that even if you have some inherent position with agent as a purpose, the argument is that this conception of an individual is not complete. The argument that the thesis of the critique is of yourself, other natural desires and affects the universe that are constantly unfolding and expanding. That's question, which was the argument of Semetsky. You say how you're saying how the Warren Semetsky is not relevant because you build a conception of agency as constituted. No, the argument in Semetsky is very simple. It's very simple. If we have other natural desires that affect the world around us, not just desires in the first place, but other things that embody our relationship with the world around us. Also, obviously, the standard cares about. For example, you care about some conceptual standard of the Asian, but the Asian cannot actively not have some relationship with the world. We still things are always changing relationships in the first place. Also, we cannot grounds. It also means the implication. It also takes up pieces of the thesis having some set of conception of what the individual is, which takes out the framework of all the reasons why reason is important. Why reason is constituted. Because argument is our relationship to reason, even if it's always changing in the first place. Even if you win that reason, changing is not relevant. Argument is our relationship to things like the view of the subject is wrong. So let's make this very simple. He's going to go for arguments about like the extension of Kant, for example, why static identity exists. The critique says static identity could exist, but there are other things that expand upon that conception of identity. Also, I do not have to win why static identity exists to take out the K, because it proves why their focus on aesthetic identity is the wrong starting point, which we previously found trying to solve. Also, the on-case state length, which is the state argument, also.
1 and 9. Oh wait, actually. Okay, the order will be overview, and then the case, and then the K. Ready?
The problem with the 2 in our strat is that all of your R's prove both ways. At best, you just prove that even if I prove that static identity exists, there are other things that are constantly in flux. But the whole point is that the app only tried to prove that static identity exists, never denied that other things like desires and affects and our motivations for reasons or actions are also in flux, which just proves that there's no link. The only stance that the 1AC took was that we have a rational identity, which means that's the only thing I have to prove. That's the only conceivable link to the K, which means if I win that, then you have there's no dissent to the perm. Now start on the case. You conceded all of my extensions of the framework once that that indicate that we do have a static identity. You've considered the extension of Korsgaard, which is that static identity is a rational will, is a subjective principle of human action, and that reason is impossible to deny. That's following. You say that it's incomplete, but that was above. Doesn't matter if it is incomplete. That there are other things that are changing because the 1AC never denied that, which means that there's no link. There's no sort of there's no link argument. You've not pointed to a place in the 1AC where we do not where I say that the things like affect, etc. are not in flux. So it doesn't matter. Also, you say that all of these arguments take out the K. You will still say that impact that the impact. Or you try to say that the impacts don't matter because even if static identity exists, then thinking about it as if it is existing means that it is bad. But if static identity exists, means that we have no choice but to think about it like that because it is a subjective principle of human action, which means that at the very best, the alternative is not able to resolve any impacts at all. So it doesn't matter. Now the case. All the other arguments you go for on case are all of the same thing. You say the same theme. You just say that other things around this change, but that's not a link argument. You say that relation to reason changes, but the development evidence just says that we always have reason. We are always autonomous agents that act on for purposes not just robots that do things for no reason. Which means that even if our relation to our reasons for action changes, we do not speak to the content of reasons, but rather the existence of reasons vis-a-vis our normative obligation. So this is not mutually exclusive with any part. So that means the L is not mutually exclusive with any part of the 1AC. You can see the affirms that I resolve a constitutional violation and that we always have to pay back for damages. That's Ripstein evidence. Now, sorry. On your overview, wait, real quick on the underview. First, you say your link. You go for the state link really hard. One point, all of these presuppose that you win that static identity is problematic because you just say that the state is valid because it staticizes people's identity. But if I win that, it's inescapable. It doesn't matter. So it still begs the question of the link argument. Second, you've considered the analysis of Coverstone, which is that it's not a question of literally affirming the state's existence or imagining that we are policymakers or literally role playing, but rather just affirming certain demands on the state and making criticisms, which is not the same thing. So I don't link to any of your arguments. There's not enough work done on this case outweighs. Now the K proper. You have considered the warrant for truth testing that otherwise we move 60 minutes of the affirms. This means that there's no link to internally to the roll ballot. Worst case, the roll ballot debate is just a wash. It's just a question whether I win the link debate. You can still vote out on affirms. Now, your June evidence is not justified. You've considered six reasons. It literally just assumes that identity is constantly in flux without actually warranting it. The 200 does not clearly extend his link arguments or his internal links to his impacts, and there is a reason for that. He did not actually justify any of his impacts. Now, all these are reasons why you can vote on the perm, but I'm also going for the racist side. This makes identity politics impossible because we can never rally around certain identity associations. You say that the K is better because it doesn't try to integrate people, but that any sort of integration is impossible if we never even have an understanding of identities like this.
And I see the K.
Yeah.
Do I have paper?
Yeah, I got paper.
Well, that's fair, yeah. Let's see that pen. Yeah.
Do any of you need to see anything?
Okay.
Oh, wait, was the June stuff, Ale? Was it June stuff? Did you just, was that all off the top?
The assignments that June makes.
Yeah.
That was written. And messages you on Facebook.
Yeah, that's fine. Kathy, can you watch it? Can you watch it? I wonder if you want to just like come and sit like here, since he's like showing you.
You have no idea how okay I am with this.
Are y'all gonna beam it or are y'all
Less than 5 minutes from now.
okay.
always a beautiful sight.
Oh my god. Hate tab.
Opening the computer.
Yeah. I guess I can.
You want to enter it on your phone or something?
Yeah, I think my phone's dead.
We could log you into my account on here.
Oh yeah, we're.